Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight, I've got David Levine as a guest. David is part of the Bar Cart Co-op and is a good friend, and he's really one of the sharpest guys in this whiskey reviewer realm that I know. He is a palate that I trust, and in all honesty, there are times where I've been in a store and I've kind of been looking at the bottle and I've thought, I wonder if David's done a review of this. And there have been a couple of times where he has, and it's been something he's liked. So I've made the purchase. But we'll get into a lot with David in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I do want to tell you about everybody else that is in the Bar Cart Co-op, and we'll let David tell his own story. But first, let's talk about Distiller's Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. On Distillers Talk, they talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about anything and everything in terms of distillation. Alan also has a show called One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, where you can send in questions to Alan on really any topic that you want in terms of distillation and that process, and he'll post video responses to that. Alan also has a show called If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. And on that show, he steps outside of the whiskey world and gets into the things of paranormal and supernatural and spiritual and Bigfoot and UFOs and a little bit of everything. It's always a lot of fun. He has some very interesting guests. So be sure to tune in to that. My Whiskey Den with Pat and Mike and Mitch airs every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central Time. My Whiskey Den is where craft whiskey is king. They always have some fun tastings and some very interesting guests, and it's always fun to hang out with the good folks in the chat. And with that, David, welcome back to Bourbon Turntable.
Kevin, happy to be back, and thank you for the kind words at start.
Yeah. Well, first, rather than me tell what you do with your podcast and your writing, why don't you tell everybody what you do?
Sure. So, as Kevin said, my name is David Levine. I run the Whiskey Ring podcast, as well as whiskeyinmyweddingring.com, and which is my rating site, review site, tasting notes, press releases, all that kind of stuff. And I honestly started this kind of just for fun. I really started just for fun. It was during early days of COVID, and when everyone was starting a podcast and writing because we had nothing else to do, and drinking a lot more whiskey because we had nothing else to do. And I found that, I had already had a couple notebooks worth of different tasting notes and reviews and stuff. And I was like, maybe I can add to the milieu here. So I did just put up a site and started writing. And then about a year after that or so, I said, I want to start talking to some of the people making this stuff. So I started a podcast. And at the time, I had listened to a lot of different podcasts. And keep in mind, I'm looking back now, and I'm now my fourth year of the podcast, which is mind-blowing to me. And I think back to those first early days, and I didn't quite know really what I wanted to do with it, to be honest. I just wanted to talk to people who were both from the smallest distilleries and the biggest. Like within the first 8 episodes, I had Michter's, Highland Park, but also Old Time Spirits, which is super small one-man show up in Pacific Northwest, and but also Dave Schmier from Proof and Wood, and I was just like, these are the whiskeys that I have around my house. I want to talk to the people who made them and ask some questions. And I think over time, and even since the last time I was on Bourbon Turntable, I have figured out kind of what my niche is. And it's simply that I started out listening, like most people do, to, let's say, Bourbon Pursuit, all the shows on the Bar Cart Co-op too, especially if you know the guys like you, like Alan, like Mitch and Pat and Mike. And you start through your friends and also whatever the biggest shows are that everyone listens to, Whiskey Cast too, and each of them had their own thing. And I was like, I want to be the podcast who asked the questions that they didn't ask, or that they set up but maybe couldn't ask in that time frame or whatever else and couldn't follow up. So I started doing a lot of research, and now I do about, depending on what's available, between a couple hours versus a day's worth of research for every episode.
Yeah.
And it's really just because I want to make my guest time as valuable to them as it is to me.
Mm-hmm.
They get full ownership of the audio. They could use it however they want, big or small. And that's kind of where I'm going towards now. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, with the writing, I've started writing more for the Whiskey Reviewer, for a couple of other outlets as well as my own site. And I'll write about pretty much anything spirits wise except for tequila and mezcal. And it's I've told producers it's not about the product. I know there are great tequilas out there, but I don't like blue agave syrup either, or blue agave flavoring. It's the flavoring that's just not for me. So it's not about you. It's totally me. Give the tequila to someone who's going to appreciate it, good or bad.
Yeah.
But they'll know at least what they're tasting.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah. Well, you're also very honest in your assessments. It's not all sugar coated, and you're not afraid to ask the tough questions, as we talked about the last time you were on. And so if you missed that episode, go back and find it. It's very much worth it. I mean, it was a great conversation, and I really appreciated the fact that it was um, based upon being honest and direct, and let's stop doing the marketing legal BS dance, and let's get some straight answers on this stuff. Because ultimately, and we'll talk a little bit about the future of bourbon in a bit, but ultimately, if you're a distiller and you're not willing to give honest answers about your product, you're going to find yourself left on the side of the road. You're going to be pushed to the margins.
People are asking more questions. It's not just the whatever percent, let's say 1% of us who are drinking bourbon, really analyzing these labels, looking at cola labels all the time.
Right.
I joke because I'm texting with someone like Jake over at Cumming Whiskey, and he's posting. Of course, he posts all the new labels that come out through the TTB, and we'll be like, "Have you tried this? Have you tried that?" We'll go back and forth. But I also know, like, he's got maybe 20,000 followers. I think he just hit. So shout out, Jake. Yeah. Congratulations on that. I do wonder, and I may ask this of him after the show. How many of the people who are following him are looking at the label and seeing, oh, that's a new thing, really cool, and how many of them are looking at the label and being like, okay, it says distilled here, it says aged there,
right.
Really picking it apart. So that's I guess also where I've found a niche. Like you said, I'm not afraid of asking, I should say, the harder questions. I don't do gotcha questions. I don't press on NDAs or anything like that because there's no point.
Right.
But I want to dig into, especially when I do a review. I don't remember if I'd mentioned this last time. I might have, but the idea of intentionality and what the producer is telling us, what they're not telling us, what they are saying we should taste, for example. I think the review that should be coming out as we're recording from Whiskey Review is on Ezra Brooks' 99 port finish.
Okay.
And I'll just speak very briefly about this. It's this idea that they're taking Ezra Brooks and then finishing it for 18 months in port casks. Now, 18 months in port casks is a long time.
It's a long time.
That's a long time. And I've had Ezra Brooks the whole line, and I like it. I don't know if it's my go-to. There are other Luxor products I prefer more, but I don't think any of them have been awful.
Right.
But I look at that bottle and I think, all right, you're telling me it's a 99 proof whiskey, a bourbon, finished in port. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, Angel's Envy. How's this going to compare? And I'm also thinking, wow, it's not as dark as I was expect for a fairly light whiskey. with 18 months of port. So the conclusion that I basically came to was it's a fine whiskey. You know, if you like Angel's Envy, you'll probably enjoy that too. It's not overly sweet, but the flavor was so delicate that you almost got lost.
Hmm.
It's like eating fruit, like a grape or something that's so much water that you end up tasting sometimes more of the water than the actual fruit.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you're using 18 months of port, that means you're either using exhausted casks,
Right.
so you can still call it port cask, or you are using very large port casks and putting it somewhere where there's not a lot of interaction.
Yeah.
Because there's just no other logical way that it gets to where it gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I see that something's been finished in some sort of wine cask, the first thought that comes to my mind is why? Why did you choose to do that? What was the
Mhm.
rationale behind it? And a lot of times I want to dig it down one more layer. Okay, was this really just, substandard whiskey that you thought, well, we can salvage it not just by mixing it in with our blend, but we can salvage it by, putting a different label on it and throw it in a port cask, and there you go. And I think that a lot of times that may be the case. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with this. Hadn't had it, don't know. But when you leave something in a port cask for that long, that indicates to me that there may have been a problem to begin with, and it took you that long to get the flavor profile you were looking for. But I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I've got no idea. I put the review out there. It's there. I know Ezra Brooks can take a, a middling review, let's say. So I don't think it's a bad product. I didn't find anything that was off with it.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted a lot more flavor.
Yeah.
And started questioning again the port thing.
Yeah.
So it's out there. They can take the hit.
Right. Well, let's move from talking about whiskeys that we're not trying tonight to some that we are. And we've got 5 different whiskeys that we're getting into, 5 different spirits, I should say, that we're getting into. And we've got just little snippets of various, conversations of the day, let's say, that we'll get into as well. And I think there are a few of these that we'll probably follow up with at some point in the future and have more discussion on. But the first thing that we are going to try together is this. Find the picture. Ironroot Harbinger cigar blend. And this is a different cigar blend in that it's only they designed it to be compatible with smoking a cigar. There's no barrel smoked anything like that that's going on with it. And I know that it's part of their 10-year anniversary. I think there's a companion bottle that's supposed to come out in November. This weighs in as all Harbingers do at 115 proof. And this is a blend of, I think, 13 different barrels. So lots of cool stuff there. So we'll get into this. So David, as you and I are tasting this one, and I think we may have talked about this. I'm pretty sure we did on the last time you were here, but take us through how you approach a whiskey that you're trying for the first time.
Sure. So this first distinction just very quickly is just like, do I know what I'm tasting, or am I blinded on this?
Right.
If I know what I'm tasting, I'm going to be looking at the label. I try not to look at the tasting notes because I don't want that to color my view, but I'll look at everything else on the label: proof,
right,
age, whatever else they tell me. If I'm blind, then I just kind of jump into it.
Yeah.
So for me, I always do a Glencairn. At this point, it's more for consistency. I haven't found a glass that I like better for it. And all my reviews have been done in a Glencairn, so keep consistent. So first thing I'll do, I'll pour it. I'll give it just a minute or two, especially if it's a new bottle being opened. I don't think it needs 30 minutes or whatever some people do, but
right,
just a minute or two sometimes, especially if it's higher proof.
Sure.
So Pour it out in the Glencairn, bring it up to my nose, mouth open, and mouth and nose both on the Glencairn, and breathe in through my mouth. So that's going to take out most of the proof, and you're just going to be left with the flavor.
Yep.
If you're at a super high proof, like 130 is going to hazmat,
Yep.
yeah, you'll probably still get some spice up there, but it gives it a chance to have the really volatile alcohols dissipate.
Yep. Without singeing
Vapor
the
goes-
nose hairs. Yeah.
Exactly. The vapor goes into your throat. You don't taste it, and then you can really taste it a little more. So then I'll rock it around my nose a little bit, around my nostrils. You usually have one nostril that's working at any given time. The other one's taking a rest, which is why colds are so annoying. You usually have a cold in just one side or something, or an allergy attack in just one side. The other one's fine, but it's working harder, and that's why your nose feels so stuffed up. And yeah, I'll see which nostril's working as I'm tasting it.
Right.
And kind of lean into that. It's usually pretty obvious. And yeah, so I'll just start smelling. What do I smell first? I'll usually get fruits are the first to come off. They're the higher alcohols, and esters and aldehydes that come off. So I'm getting a lot of red fruit. I'm talking like cherries in particular, like black cherries.
Mm-hmm.
Little hint of chocolate in the background too. I don't usually get that till later. I'm curious. You said this is meant to pair with a cigar, as opposed to other cigar blends that are just different cask types
Right.
together. Does it say which cigar type it's meant to pair with?
No, I don't know that.
I'm not a cigar aficionado by any means.
And I am not either. So it wasn't even a question that I considered. But it is 48 months. That's I guess the youngest of the whiskeys that are included in the blend. I know that there is some tenure in there. Some of Barrel 1 from Ironroot is included in there. Not a lot, but a little.
It's probably not a lot left, I would think, after 10 years.
And they use lots of different corn varietals. So there'll be some purple corn in this, some orange, red, and as well as yellow.
So this is it's not my first pour of the day, but 115 proof. It's got a good what's the word I'm looking for? The proof hits really nicely. And it's hitting, I look at where it hits me. If it's more mid tongue, it's probably proof. It's more front of the tongue. It's, for me at least, it's more oak. And front of the tongue is going to be that real like capsaicin, peppery heat. Whereas if it's mid tongue, then it like this, I don't feel anything on the tip of my tongue. So I'm getting much more proof, much more sweetness, still fruit leather, I would say.
Yep.
Like real fruit leather. It's delicious. Sweeter side, but fruity, sweet. Some dark honey.
Yep.
What else? Just going through what else am I feeling here? Yeah, dark honey. It's not at all what I would consider grain forward. And that I'm agnostic on that term. That can be both good or bad.
Sure. Absolutely.
For this, I don't taste I'm not like, oh, I'm tasting roasted corn.
Yes.
On that, which sometimes I do. And sometimes I like, and sometimes I'm like, I should not be tasting that. So, but no, this comes across as very balanced. And we always think of, or at least I always think of with Texas whiskeys, balance is a big thing because those things can roll off. That's why I said I was really surprised there's anything left in cask 1 after 10 years.
Yeah.
But
so when you're talking about balance, what do you mean? What does balance mean to you?
So balance for me means that you should be able to taste, experience, and remember. And the first thing is you have to be able to taste if it's out of balance or there's too much proof, there's too much oak, there's too much of one flavor. Like we were saying about the port cask, like if there's it's been aged in 18 months in port and it's really in port casks, then maybe you don't taste the whiskey. And
Right.
I always want to know if there's a finish or if there's something else. I want to be able to taste both the finish or both the cask and the spirit.
Yep.
The next thing is the experience is it so hot that it's burning my palate off?
Right.
Like I've got a pretty high tolerance for proof at this point, but there are still some that can come in around 100 sometimes that just punch way above their weight.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be okay. I'm just usually not expecting it. And it's quite a surprise when that happens. And it takes a few sips for my tongue to acclimate. But that I would usually consider that a little out of balance because you don't expect 100 proof whiskey to burn that much.
Right.
Like if you've never had a drink before, yeah, it's going to kill you. But
Sure.
if you've even been drinking 80 proof, like 100, yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit, but shouldn't blow you out. And then the last thing with balance is remembering it. You know, do you remember from when you first smelled it to when, for me, I'm writing my notes or I'm typing them up or writing a story? Like, do I remember one thing about the whiskey but not the other? Do I remember that it was out of balance? Do I remember
Right.
that this was a black cherry bomb or, you know, there was a really funny tasting note that I hope I can say on here.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So when Bell Mead was doing their finishing series and they had the really good honey releases and then they did a barrel of vanilla extract.
Yep.
And I got a sample of it from some crazy guy who was online, friend of mine, good guy, but crazy. And I was like, this tastes like it was aged in the Pillsbury Doughboy's butthole. Like you couldn't taste anything other than just sticking your face in a vanilla barrel. Like that was all you could taste. The whiskey, it was around 110, 115 proof, something like that.
Right.
Couldn't remember a damn thing other than just vanilla, and
Yeah.
extract too. Not the fresh vanilla bean scent that we all love or
Right.
that they put into cosmetics. It's really like that alcohol and vanilla thing. I was like, guys, I love what you guys do, but this one,
Right.
don't do a number 2 on this one. Like, skip the second barrel.
Yeah. Yeah. Pillsbury butthole. Don't do a number 2. Okay.
Yeah.
I follow
Sorry,
you.
I didn't even mean to do that, but yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's so anyway with Ironroot. I will also admit I have not had a ton of Ironroot products.
Mm-hmm.
I've had Harbinger from maybe 6 years ago or so.
Yep.
So when it was fairly new. I know I had some when it was on the round table that we did. There was an Ironroot in there.
Yes.
Was that a Harbinger or is that something else?
Oh, what did we talk? Oh, no, that was yeah, we did a brandy.
Oh, that's right. It was the brandy. Yep. That's right.
Because we did that show, the Bar Cart show with Wallersheim's rye experiments.
Yeah,
and
the yeast experiments. Yeah. Yep. That's right. So I mean, I remember liking the brandies quite a bit. The whiskey, the last time I had the Harbinger, again 6 years ago, so a lot can change in 6 years in craft whiskey, and even more so in Texas. I wasn't a huge fan at first. I think it was at that point it was a little harsh to me. I could see the core bourbon flavors kind of getting there, the caramels, vanilla, brown sugars, baking spices, but I mean at that point they would have only been like 3 or 4 years in.
Yep.
So for me at least, I didn't think it was quite there yet. This to me tastes and feels like a finished in the sense of completed whiskey.
Right.
This feels like it's gotten to the point where it should get.
Yeah. No, this is one of the favorite things that I've tried this year. I think it's fantastic. A lot of the notes that you had are kind of the same things that I did. the dark honey, the dark cherries. It's to me, it's the overriding descriptor I had was dark and sweet,
Mhm.
and I said, they should have called this Halle Berry. It's dark and sweet. But I
Yeah,
think it's delicious. I think they've done a great job with it. But
totally agreed. It's
yep,
mouth-watering. It's making me want to go back.
yep, yeah. That's one of those dangerous ones where every sip brings you to want another sip. So now we're gonna try. You had sent me some samples, and we've got some of those that we're going to try tonight. And the next one we're going to get into is the a Field and Sound bottled in bond bourbon. So
Yes, sir.
first of all, tell us a little bit about it's what is it? Long Island Spirits, is that right?
Yes, sir. So Long Island Spirits, it's been around actually for quite a while. They're, as the name suggests, on Long Island, near where I live and grew up. They're out on the North Fork. So it's an area where up until pretty recently, like last 20, 30 years, it was mainly agricultural. We grew a lot of potatoes there. Long Island at one point was famous for its potatoes, as famous as Idaho is.
Wow.
And it was also, I mean, Suffolk County, where it is also the third largest Klan membership in the country, but we don't talk about that side. So,
Good.
Like I said, goes both ways.
Sure.
So Long Island Spirits, they've been out for a while. I think in 2007, if I'm remembering correctly, which is pretty early for any craft, let alone New York. I mean, I think Tuttletown was 2005. So one of the earlier ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the founder, Rich, had, I would put it as being, he kind of toiled away in mild obscurity for quite a long time. The stuff was sold locally, made more money on the Long Island vodka and RTDs and things like that, which are good too. But he had this bourbon that was under a different label, and it was under the Rough Rider label, taking on the Teddy Roosevelt kind of character.
Yeah.
So it used to be Rough Rider, Old Lion, and what was the rye called? Something else Teddy Roosevelt related that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that was the idea.
Okay.
He's Teddy Roosevelt, born in New York City,
Yep.
grew up in Long Island, Sagamore Hill. So he's a very beloved figure in, I guess, Eastern Nassau and in Suffolk County, and New York icon. So for a long time, that's how the whiskeys were marketed. A couple of years ago, though, I think they found that they just couldn't get the traction that they wanted. And so they decided to go for a rebrand. And the rebrand effectively is Field and Sound. And I should say before Rich kills me, the rebrand doesn't mean that the others are going away. They are still going to be Rough Rider lines and that there, but they're going to be a little bit younger, whereas the Field and Sound lines are all bottled in bond, except for the finishing series, which is at 120 proof instead. But everything else is bottled in bond. They've got American single malt. They got a wheated whiskey, bourbon, rye. They've got the bourbon finished in their own rum casks that are 8 years old. I've had some of that rum, and it is funky and grassy, and it's more, I would say, in the style of an agricole, so a fresh cane.
Yeah.
But because it's been aging so long, which agricoles usually don't, it also has a lot of that darkness that you expect from some aged rums as well. So really delicious stuff. And I went out there in January to talk with them, and I've been trying to tell people about them ever since. So Field and Sound refers to the fields. Like I said, mostly potatoes until recently. Now it's more corn, grain, rye, and Long Island Sound. They're on the North Shore, the North Fork, and they get all that saltwater air from the Western Atlantic just flowing on there. So to me, I get a little bit of salinity in their whiskeys. We're not talking like we're adding salt water to it. It's just this very light note, and people who like particularly west coast of Scotland whiskeys, so Islay, but also the Hebrides, Arran, Jura, bunch of the new Ardnamurchan, they all have that because they're also on the coast of the Atlantic. The winds are blowing that way, so they blow west to east onto the western coast, and you get a little salinity as you age. And to me, it's like adding salt to a baked good. It just doesn't make it salty; it just adds to the flavor.
Right. That's interesting. So, as we're trying this one, let's talk a little bit about the future of bourbon, and that doesn't necessarily mean the future of Long Island spirits, but more it just happens to be we're talking about this at this moment. But the future of bourbon in general. Just a couple of bullet point thoughts, David, on that.
Well, as you've seen, I have a challenge of being brief, but I think my first thought is we're about to experience a bubble, and a bubble bursting, I should say. There's a lot of stock. People have been producing a lot for good 10, 15, even 20 years now. And the salespeople and projections and everything will say they had a rough first quarter this year. And even compared to what they should have made, a rough cut in the last half of last year. So I think we're reaching a point where the bourbon market is being again saturated, and I would say oversaturated. The big guys are having some trouble. Heaven Hill, with as we were talking about before recording, the forced retirements and buyouts at Heaven Hill. MGP's got both a lot of stock and also not enough.
Right.
We're seeing brands put younger ages into aged product now. Instead of, for example, actually, this still happened with Heaven Hill. Last year, the year before, they stopped producing EC23, Elijah Craig 23, to focus entirely on 18 and to give more stock to their single barrel program and to Elijah Craig barrel proof. And unfortunately, too, we're also seeing a lot of craft distilleries running into trouble. The COVID bubble is over.
Right.
People don't have the discretionary income that they had during COVID. They're out and about spending money on other things. And for a lot of distilleries that grew up and blew up during COVID, where people were buying a lot of stuff from them because they had money to try something new, they don't have that anymore, and they can't sustain it. They can't sustain their growth and their inventory even without it. Yeah. I get news alerts every day from, we just set up Google alerts for certain things, and one of them is distillery closing. And I got to tell you, recently it's been maybe one or two a week.
Wow.
Whereas last year was 1 to 2, maybe a month, if not more, or less often, I should say.
Right.
And it's all over the country. We're talking New York, California, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky. They're all really facing a challenge. And I think the only ones that are a little bit more immune, if you will, are folks that didn't let the COVID bubble blow them up. They continued organic growth as opposed to exponential growth. And so they may not have the biggest stockpile of whiskey, but they're also not, basically their sales haven't changed that much. They're also not super expensive. I think this is the one that I think to mention is the biggest one that we may see go bust is Barrel.
Right.
Barrel Craft Spirits. That is a company that redefined blending for us in the US. And, no matter what happens with them, they'll have that legacy of helping to make blending not a 4-letter word anymore in American whiskey, which is great.
Right. And it went from being incredibly in demand that, you could not find it. their bottles were selling on secondary markets for multiples of
Yeah.
retail price, to now
Mhm.
party's over.
And it's very ironic in the sense I remember being at the opening of their facility in Jeffersontown, and I mean, all the Illuminati were there, the bourbon Illuminati and such. I felt a bit almost out of place. There were plenty of people with way more cred than I had. They were there, uh, which also was kind of a nice feather in the cap. I'm not going to lie,
Sure.
but I mean, it's a beautiful new facility. It was purpose built for them. They basically gutted the facility that was there and built everything new, from conference rooms to bottling line. They have a speakeasy in there,
Mhm.
and we had a lot of fun going through trying stuff. At that point, they had the what was the two finishes? They had the original finishing of Tale of Two Islands. So they'd taken their bourbon blend and finished it in the Tale of Two Islands casks, which in
Yep.
itself was a fantastic release.
Yep.
And then they had one other too that it wasn't the Mizunara that just came out recently. It was another one. And it was all positive. It was so rosy and all of that. And then a couple months later, at the turn of the year, we're seeing this facility is up for sale.
Right.
That's like someone really screwed up their projections. Like that's
Right.
in the business world, that's a huge turnaround.
Yeah. And it just, the ones that I could think of as I sat down tonight to get ready for the show, these are the projects that are underway in Kentucky. Augusta, building a new facility. Brothers Wright, building a new facility. Heaven's Door, J. Mattingly, Lawrenceburg Bourbon Company, Pursuit Spirits, RD1, Western Kentucky Bourbon Company. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 that I could just think of off the top of my head. I know there are others. Barrel House is doing, for them, a big expansion, but relatively speaking, small. And that doesn't count all of the huge projects that are going on with the big guys. So
I was
that's
thinking the Whiskey House too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested and in things, and a lot of it doesn't affect what ends up in the bottle. It's about the tourism experience of it.
Mhm.
So I hope that that people are wise in the way they're projecting this, and what money they're putting into it. Because right now I would be a little bit nervous if I were investing $100 million in a brand new distillery in, well, anywhere really.
I agree. The trends are going overwhelmingly to the old boys.
Mhm.
So I don't. While Heaven Hill, we said they have they're laying off people. They also just put in a brand new still house with another gigantic still.
Yep. Right.
They're not going anywhere. Beam's not going anywhere. Four Roses just today came out with announced that they have 2 new mash bills.
Right.
Turkey, they're not going anywhere. They've got plans.
Four Roses, 2 new bourbon mash bills.
2 new
They
bourbon mash bills. Still don't wear rye.
Still don't have a rye. Still don't have a rye. I mean, I think they can buy enough rye to actually make a rye, but this,
I think so. I
as far
really
they've
wish
not.
they would do a rye.
Yeah, I just think it'd be interesting to see. Sure.
Yeah, I've gotten to try some of the like old 40s Four Roses rye, and
Yeah.
it was pretty good. I don't know if it would be like, I don't know. I don't think it would be the leader of the pack necessarily today,
Right.
but it was good rye. We're not talking just kind of the crappy blended whiskey that we think of. It was good
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And my first thought seeing the Four Roses news was, okay, we got 2 new bourbon mash bills. Does this mean 20 new products? Does it, are they doing only 1 or 2 yeasts with this?
Let's hope not. Let's hope it's just.
I mean, I hope not too, but
two new bottles to add to our lineup, and we're done. So, but who knows?
Yeah. Maybe
Who
they'll throw
knows?
one on the O and one on the E or something. Or no, sorry, one on the B and one on the E, and see if that matches up. But
Right.
it's a yeah. So I think that's the one trend is people are going back to the old reliables, and
Yep.
they're also going local. So the one saving grace of the craft distilleries right now is that people are taking a look around what's around you.
Right.
What distilleries are near you, and there are so many of them now, both whiskey and otherwise, that we can do that. There are distilleries in all 50 states now, which couldn't say a couple
Right.
years ago.
Right.
And there are established distilleries, I would say, in most, if not all of those too. I know New York, California, and Texas kind of vie every month to see who's got the most craft distillers or the most distilleries overall. But I mean, they're popping out of the snow. I mean, they're still coming out.
Yep.
But yeah, it remains to be seen, especially for whiskey ones, how many survive. I think ones that are doing gin, vodka, RTDs, still in bottle stuff, they'll probably be okay for a while. But I mean, the whiskey ones, we know you can't rush it. There have been
Right.
plenty of people who've tried, and I
It
don't know
does
that
not
we
work.
would. Yeah, I don't know that we'd recommend any of them.
Yes, I
So
don't know that anybody's been successful. Nobody's broken that code yet.
no, I think the
But
closest we got was maybe some of the chip finishings that they've done. But
yeah.
even then, I'm like, this is it's a lot of extraction.
Yep. But hey, let's talk about this Field and Sound Bottled and Bond bourbon. Do you know the mash bill on this one? It's a rye mash bill, I think.
Yes.
At least
So
it's
it is a rye mash bill. It's 60% corn, 33% rye, and 7% malted barley.
okay.
So fairly high rye mash bill. All the corn and rye is local. The malted barley is local if they can get it, but that's not as consistent around here.
Okay. You know, what one of the things that I first got off the nose when I put it in the glass was that kind of a dusty pencil sharpener note.
Hmm?
That kind of dissipated as it sat in the glass a while, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Not and I know, hey, it smells like a pencil sharpener. That that's usually not what somebody's aiming for. But it wasn't.
That-
It was kind of nostalgic, actually. Um,
That's what I look for in my whiskeys. I mean, I love a dusty pencil sharpener. It just that just gets me going. I should say one other thing that is important to the taste is it sorry, it is a sweet mash as well.
okay,
They sweet mash everything, and they use a combination of yeast. They use regular distillers yeast. They also use some champagne yeast. There's a
oh,
lot of wineries on the North Fork. It's kind of like our own Napa over there. So they use champagne yeast and wine yeast from some of those wineries over there.
interesting.
Actually, their brandy, which is really really hot, but also very good. It's redistilled wine from one of the places they partner with. Comes out at 166.3 proof.
Okay,
I mean, it's very tasty once your face kind of comes back together and you can handle it. Otherwise, you feel like the guy from Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first
yeah.
couple of seconds.
All right, so tell us what you're tasting on this one.
So immediately, I'm getting more of a grassy note. So I'm thinking grains in the field, tiny bit of barnyard funk or
Mhm.
funk in general, and that might be. I think that might be what you were picking up as the dusty pencil
Yep,
sharpener. It's kind
could
of
be.
or like an old pencil eraser kind of taste in a way.
Mhm.
But yeah, to me, that comes out across as nostalgic and not an off note.
Right.
It's not as sweet as most bourbons. It's more savory, leans more into the I would say kind of sweet rye herbs. So tarragon is usually my go-to for that. A little bit of licorice in there,
Mhm.
and the corn sweetness is there. It's just not overwhelmingly caramelly.
Yeah.
Um, and something they do that we're actually pretty familiar with from our friend Alan is they use Kelvin number 2 char
Okay.
for everything. So
Nice.
Their
I like it.
their kind of ethos is similar to Allen's, like respect the grain, put a really good product into the barrels,
Hmm.
let the barrels do their work in terms of esterification and the chemical compounds, oxidization, all that. But other than that, like you want something good going in. You don't want the barrel to fix the problems. You want it to elevate the goodness.
Yep. I get some lemon in this.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's very different. Yeah, I enjoy that. Enjoy that quite a bit.
That's usually a dangerous word when you say it's different. Some people are like,
Oh,
"Ooh, that's different," and others like, "That's different." So,
no, most of the time when I say different, different is good.
yeah.
But no, I like that. I like that a lot. And it's um, you talked about the salinity of it, so that kind of uh, whispers of a of terroir playing into
Mhm.
their whiskeys, which is a good thing. And they're using local grains, and that's a good thing. So I like that a lot. I think I like what they're doing. Um, it's an interesting whiskey, and I think there's some good stuff going on there. Now the third one is this Armagnac. So I know you've got some personal involvement in this. So tell us about this and what your role is in it.
Sure. So this is a 1982 Domaine Loup Maroc Armagnac. What that means is this was 40 years old when it was uh, actually, I'll be honest, I think it was a little over 40 years. I think it was 42. But I helped the Beastmasters Club up here in New York
Mhm.
pick it. Now, I'll be very honest when I say, and I think I said this in my review too, that I was one of 20 people there. It was not one of three, so I don't want to overstate my involvement too much. But it was a fairly unanimous pick. We had 4 barrel samples to choose from, and Lancantada doesn't do a lot of picks in the U.S. It's very small. Like I know a lot of people who are into Armagnac are gonna be like, "Oh, Lancantada," they know that name, but the reality is that very few barrels are actually coming in. It's just the fact that whenever they do come in, chances are Lancantada is the person behind them, the importer
Right,
behind them.
right.
Um, so this is so 40-ish, 41-ish years in oak.
Mhm.
Um, and it's at 51.9% ABV. The one thing I have not been able to figure out or find yet is whether it was a wet or dry cellar.
Mhm.
That's only important for Armagnac in terms of basically, was it very humid in the cave or cellar where they aged it, or was it very dry and aerated? So I don't quite know. My tendency is to think that it was probably wet cellared. Um, but honestly, at this point, that's more of a guess than anything else.
Hmm. And if people go to your website, they can find a link to go to the to a site where they can purchase it. Correct.
Yes, so we still have bottles available from the Beastmasters Club. I'll again be totally honest. I have no financial interest here. I don't get anything from them for helping to find people with bottles. For me, it's just a really good Armagnac.
Mhm.
And Armagnac is one of those. It's one of the very few spirits at this point that you can still get really aged stuff for not that much money.
Yeah.
Um,
Relatively speaking, yes.
Relatively speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
If we're going on like a $10 per age, sorry, $10 per year kind of thing, where
Right.
scotches used to be,
Right.
this would be 400, probably more because it's at 40 years.
Yep.
But because of the way Armagnac is aged, I mean, at 40 years, and this is probably in a larger oak cask, like a larger format cask, but there are still 228 bottles out of the cask. Most of these 40-year-old whiskeys that come out, they have maybe 30, 40
Right.
at most. So it's a very different process and aging and all of that. But yeah, so in the review, there's a link where you can still buy it. There are still bottles available. And if people need kind of a snapshot of what the flavors are, the guys named it Leather Jacket. And to me, it really is that. I would say almost the only thing I would add is a before and after Wheel of Fortune style, and I would make it Fruit Leather Jacket.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's not to jump too far ahead, but it's a different kind of fruit. It is almost a candy fruit to me. Like you remember those strawberry candies that were in the wrapper that had a strawberry
Mhm.
on them? I get that note
The
on the
ones that
nose.
nobody ever bought, but somehow everyone's grandma had.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yes. And again, that's a
Yeah,
very
like
positive, nostalgic tasting note for me. But
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I'd say it's like I can get that like a strawberry flavoring syrup.
Mhm.
If you were gonna have strawberry soda and you just needed the
Yep.
machine to add in the carbonation,
Right.
this is what you would use.
Yeah. But I think there's some chocolate in there. There's and yeah, the leather note is certainly there as well. And there's Armagnac always has a very nice funkiness to it.
Mhm, for sure. And should we say when I say relatively inexpensive, this bottle is at I think 220 or 230
Yeah.
per bottle, so it's not your everyday bottle priced,
Right.
which is fair. But keep in mind for reference, it's a 40-year-old bottle for 230
Right.
or so. So and I think I picked up a 50-year-old Armagnac last year for 250.
Yep.
So it's very much on a sliding scale, but this is an area where you can get a 20-year-old product, which is probably going to be very good
Mhm.
for under $100.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Armagnac is always interesting. It's always and um, you can find them like you say that have some age on them that are not going to bankrupt you to get. Like I got a few years ago, I got a an Armagnac that was barreled the year I was born.
mhm,
Okay, so a 1967,
mhm.
and I think I paid maybe high 200s for it. Okay, so I couldn't complain
Exactly.
about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts or tasting notes on this one?
I just keep coming back to the fruit leather is just so the
Hmm.
concentrated fruits is so strong, and I love
Hmm.
it. There's something about Armagnac because if you compare it to whiskey, when we throw fruit notes at whiskey,
Hmm.
those fruit notes have to be created by the yeasts from the grains because grain by itself does not taste like strawberries or grapes
Right.
or anything like that. Here, you've got grapes to start out. In this case, Colombard and Ony Blanc grapes, which are two of the most common used for Armagnac. So you've already got fruit there, and then it just gets distilled once, just once, and aged for all that time, just concentrating down. And to me, that's one of my favorite things about Armagnac. It takes the sweetness of bourbon and the fruitiness. You can
Hmm.
get a lot of age on it without a lot of oak,
Right.
and that I think is probably my biggest note on this is that it's 40 plus years old, and there's not a lot of oak on this.
No, there's I don't get a lot of oak tannins in this at all.
And I I'm someone who does not like wood in my whiskey. So
I am the same way. I am the
yeah.
same way. I'd agree completely. Um, so, so you can go to. I think I've got the podcast up here, the podcast logo up here, but you can go to whiskeyinmyweddingring.com. Is that or
Yep.
is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's whiskeyinmywedding.com. If it's not, it should be in one of the most recent reviews, so it should be on that first page. Um, or just search whiskey in my wedding ring, Glen Cantata. It'll pop up. It was also on my Instagram recently, so should be
Okay.
able to find it. And if you have any trouble finding it, just shoot me an email, David at whiskey in my wedding ring, and on Instagram and all that too.
Yeah. And what is the Instagram handle?
Oh, Instagram is whiskey in my wedding ring.
Hmm?
I do own the, well, quote unquote, own the Whiskey Ring podcast handle as well.
Mhm.
But I do everything through the Whiskey in My Wedding Ring handle.
Right. You can go to the Whiskey in My Wedding Ring website and go to the Whiskey Ring podcast link, if I remember that correctly.
Yep, it'll link you right out to the hosting, the Podbean site, and you can find it also just wherever you find your podcast. It should be on pretty near every platform, and if not, let me know.
Yeah. Well, let's move to our next one, which is this Pacific Coast Spirits
Yes.
American Single Malt. So
Yes, so this is a fun one. So we have my wife and I have family in California in San Diego,
Mhm.
and every time we're there, I try to visit either a distillery or brewery or a store or bar, basically somewhere with whiskey that has something to offer.
Right.
They've got some really good bars out there. Whiskey House, 7 Grand, San Diego. But in this particular case, this came from, I think, when I was there in November, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just did a simple search of distilleries around San Diego. This was about 20-30 minutes north in Oceanside. And I just walked in. They have a restaurant that's right adjacent to the distillery. You can see the distillery from the restaurant, all the equipment and barrels that are aging there. And I ended up talking to the waitress and the bartender, and then lo and behold, the owner and distiller comes out. His name's Nick. And he's like, "You see that that bottle with the red strip on it and the red label? I think that's our last bottle of that batch." And it happened to be this bottle. So I was like, "All right, I'll take a risk on this."
Sure.
I'd had the this is the cast strength. I had the regular, pardon me, the regular American single malt that they have, as well as the bourbons. But the American single malt really, it stood out to me quite a bit. It tasted very mature for 6 years. I also, to be honest, I have a love-hate relationship with California and distilling. Goes back to California wine too. I'm not a huge California wine person, and I genuinely think it's because of the water.
Interesting.
If you, I am going to sound so snobby on this, and I'm willing to own it. Yes, we talk about New York water is amazing. I would argue, I mean, I've had tap water in Kentucky too. That's very good too. You can't drink the tap water in a lot of places in California. It's just awful. And I mean, if you're watering your wine, if you're proofing down your whiskey, and you're using anything but RO water, then you're gonna have that taste in there. And I think and you're gonna have the water go into the grapes that are going into the wines. And so I think there's just something about that water I really don't like. But anyway, back to this. I ended up talking to Nick for a bit, and this became my kind of surprise. My biggest surprise of 2023 was this bottle and this distillery. I'd never heard of them before going there. And then I just walked in and ended up taking pictures. He was like, "You seem to know what you're doing. You can go in and take pictures of whatever you want." And because he knew I wasn't going to blow anything up or start still or something. Thieve out of a bottle. I probably should have, because I could have, but yeah, this, I think consistently. So, Kevin, I share pretty much anything in my collection with people if they ask, but I also share with Patreon members, and several of them said this was their most surprising spirit that I gave them last year. Totally new distillery that very few had heard of. I think one person had heard of it. It's not really sold outside of California, outside of the Oceanside and Southern California area.
Yeah.
And it's just fantastic.
Yeah. There's a subtle, I mean, the chocolate note is very evident on the nose, but there's a specific either type of chocolate or chocolate adjacent note there that I can't quite pick out yet. But is there do they use some sort of chocolate malt in their mash bill? Do you know?
So I have to look back at the bottle to remember. To be honest, I know in California in general, but especially in the San Diego area, craft brewing is huge there.
Hmm.
There are over 100 craft breweries just in San Diego. So the idea of using different malts and different barleys is certainly something they would do. I'm almost sure that they do.
Yeah.
I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Hmm.
I should have looked at my own review because I know I wrote it down. But I know he was playing around with using some caramel malt and chocolate malt and
Hmm.
crystal malt as well, crystal 60,
Yep.
and just regular old Stiller's malt as well. So I think there is some variation there. I'll have to get back to you on exactly what it is. But I agree with you that this is a darker American single malt.
Hmm.
Definitely leans into those chocolatey notes. Get some raisins. Raisinets are usually like a dark chocolate raisinette. It's
That's
usually the
it.
note I go with.
It's a chocolate covered raisin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it almost tastes finished in a way,
Hmm.
but not overly sweet. But it tastes like you threw some Oloroso in there, or maybe some
What kind
Madeira
of barrel?
in
What kind of
particular.
barrel was it in? Do you know?
Just a 53 gallon. I think it was a char number 3. I want to say.
Okay.
I and pretty sure ISC as well. It was either ISC or Kelvin. It wasn't a particularly niche cooperage.
Okay. No, this is fantastic.
And to me, it also just shows the variation you can have in American single malt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that American single malt is one of my favorite categories of whiskey. I think you can do a lot with it. The the barrel finishes make sense and I think are well done. I think it's still a segment that I think is owned a lot more by craft distillers than it is the big boys at this point, though they're trying to get into that more.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think it lends itself to creativity in what the craft distillers are doing with it, and there are a lot of really really good American single malts right now.
There really are. We keep coming across them, and California's got some really good winners there, and I think that's because of the brewing scene out there in Pacific Northwest as well. Just West
Hmm.
Coast
Hmm.
has some great American single malt there. We all know about the big guys, Westward, Westland,
Right.
one place like that, but here, Copperworks, Spiritworks,
Yep.
a couple of different ones are really showing out.
Yep. There's some good ones in Virginia.
Yeah.
There, Deerhammer in Colorado, I think, kind of to me leads the pack. That's my opinion. So I think there's a lot of really good places that you can go to find some excellent American single malt. And this is one that I did not know about, but yeah, I enjoy this quite a bit.
And the with the American single malt, we're still waiting on that standard of identity. Um,
I mean, that's
there's
been that has been out there for what, a year and
more
a
even. I
half.
think, yeah, the public comment period was September to, I want to say, November of 22. So at
Oh
least a
yeah,
year and a half
yeah,
after the public comment period, and we're still waiting. And everyone's just sitting there like, we're just gonna do what we said we're gonna do.
right. We're going to
Like,
keep making this, and whenever you guys at the TTB want to get on board, go
yeah,
go right ahead.
we're gonna keep it 100% malt. That's pretty much the one rule, if you will,
Yeah,
that the industry has kept itself to. But everything else, like, use whatever cask you want as long as it fits within.
yeah,
I just say there are two rules: 100% barley, and it has to fit into the American whiskey regulations, like the 27 and CFR 5 regulations.
right.
Other than that, between those two poles, assalamu alaikum, do whatever you want in there.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Um, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I think, and to your point too, when you have it's a space that's owned by craft distillers, I completely agree with you in that. And then when you have someone like Beam come out with Claremont Steep,
Hmm.
which fits all the definitions that the industry would
Right.
consider, as long as it's good, and I think it was good. I don't think it beat out this, for example, but I think Claremont Steep was a good product objectively.
Sure.
It just gives more credence to the idea that you should pay attention to this category.
Yep. Yeah,
It's
and I
clearly
think,
there.
and not to get too far down that rabbit trail, but yeah, I think Claremont Steep it's good. It's not, to me. It probably didn't crack the top 10 of American single malts right now, but it's good. And if they're bringing more attention by Beam getting into it, brings more attention to that segment. Great, great, because there's some excellent stuff out there.
Exactly. And volume wise, what are we talking? This is got to be, maybe we're doing a million cases, probably less than that, a
Probably
year
less.
of American single malt. We're not touching any of the big guys. We're not
No,
going anywhere near that.
no. But if you look at craft distillers that are focusing in that segment, uh,
Mhm.
they're kind of shielding themselves a little bit, I think, from the bourbon bubble bust.
For sure.
Yep.
Diversification.
Yep.
Yeah. You got
Yes.
to, their thing is
Zit.
you got to diversify enough that, like you said, you're not dependent on one line of product,
Right.
but also not so much that you don't have enough to feed the demand and then people look elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah. And someone
And
said
that's
to me very
definitely real.
recently, yeah, someone said to me recently a great line, which was that uh, the difference between a core expression and a limited release is how many bottles someone buys. Yeah. So
That's a good. I like that. I like that a lot.
it's all marketing. It's all marketing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is one that I've really enjoyed sharing with people to have them take a look. Um, I would say this and Seven Caves Spirits are my two favorite Southern California ones right now.
Okay.
Seven Caves will be even harder to find than this. It's truly, it's hyper local, but Jeff, the guy who runs it, he's distills everything there. Um, he has built most of his own machinery, and yeah, he's doing everything from bourbons to ryes to like pineapple spirits and uh, their own maple syrup, which is on that might be my favorite maple syrup. Honestly, is their rum cask maple syrup. Does his own
Okay.
rums. Yeah, those two, you probably will need to visit California to get them, but it's worth the trip.
Okay. All right. So I've got to go to California. Well, I want to go out to visit our friend Chris at Golden Beaver anyway. So that would just be a good fly out, go to Golden Beaver, drive down the coast, and see
That's the
who
thing.
all I
You
can
got to
see.
have someone go with you though, because and that's what I think that's what they tell you about the Pacific Coast Highway is that you can't enjoy it as a driver because it's so curvy and
Yes.
narrow that you got to focus on the road. So you want someone else to be driving, and you can enjoy the view the whole way.
Well, yeah. Every time I've driven the PCH, I've been the driver. So
Mm.
that may be time to turn that table. Um, let's get into our last pour of the evening, and that is, let's see, I've got a photo here somewhere. Kentucky Peerless. Now, this is a little bit different. This is an 8-year rye, and this was a special release. Um, so single barrel special release, 110.2 proof. So that came out, I think, about 2 or 3 months ago. Distillery only release.
So Peerless, for me, has been one of those craft distilleries that Similar to what I said. I don't even remember the brand that I said earlier, but oh, Ironroot. So similar to them, where I feel like at the beginning their stuff needed a little more time, not necessarily more age, just more time to figure itself out. And from the time that I first tried them in the late 2010s to now, mind-blowing difference. I was down there in November, so I was there before this came out, unfortunately, because otherwise I would have come back with a bottle of it. And their new stuff is so much better. It's like a different distillery almost, and it came of age. They figured out what they needed to do, and it came of age.
Yeah. They're in the last year they've released their high rye bourbon, which I thought was fantastic. At that point, I thought this is the best thing that Peerless has released ever. And then at the same time they released this rye, they released a toasted barrel. And I'm like, okay, you know, toasted barrel, everybody's doing that, yada, yada, yada. But absolutely terrific. Have you had a chance to try that? The toasted barrel?
I don't know that I have.
All right. Well, I'll send you some because you need to have it. I think it's terrific. But one thing with Peerless is they had Caleb Kilburn, who had been their master distiller since the place opened. He left, I guess, a little over a year and a half ago.
Right after Whiskey Magazine or American Whiskey did a cover story on him, no less. But yes.
Yeah, that's right. And recently, Alan Bishop left Spirits of French Lick. So those are two very prominent, well-respected distilleries whose prominent, well-respected distillers, non-owner distillers, I would say, have left. So what are your thoughts on how that impacts the future of the distilleries that they left behind?
You know, I think before I even answer that, I'll add in a third one that was from 2 years ago, but I think is no less important for the conversation, which was Denny Potter and Jane Bowie leaving Maker's Mark.
Yep.
So I think the distinction that I would make is the, how do I want to put this? I'm trying to phrase my words very carefully here. I think it's about how the distillery has been marketing itself for the longest time. So Maker's Mark, obviously it's about makers. Like we know Dave Pickerel was the master distiller there. We know they've been going back for years. Pappy's got their yeast strain. Like Makers was always going to be Makers. And while losing Jane and Denny was a big blow, I don't think anyone looked at that move and thought, oh, woe is Makers. You know, they're going to shut down. They're going to lose all their
right.
They just guess it was a blow. They found a new person and came in.
Yeah, Denny and Jane didn't take the dripping red wax with them when they left.
Exactly. And Caleb is kind of a middle point here where he was there from the beginning. So we definitely had a strong hand on the character of the distillery and its product. But at the same time, because you had such a historical component to that with the Taylor family going back to Henry Craver and there, I think they can lean more into this idea of, yes, he helped found the character, but it's not one that is necessarily tied to him. And if he were to go to a different distillery, which I don't think he has at this point, has he? Or
they're starting at that was one that should have been on the list. They're starting a distillery out in Eastern Kentucky. Yeah.
Okay, so he's starting. So I don't think anyone's expecting that new distillery to, mirror or mimic Peerless. I think it'll be a little different in whatever way it is, and Caleb will bring his skills, no doubt, to it. But I think it'll be different. Now, Alan is a different story, and Spirits of French Lick is a different story. And of course, we've both got very strong ties to Alan, and for that matter, too, Spirits of French Lick because of him.
Right.
I think what makes that situation so different is that, to me, the brand was built around him.
Mm-hmm.
And when you thought Spirits of French Lick, you thought him. You thought Alan, Alchemist Cabinet,
Mm-hmm.
uh, some of the shows that are in the Bar Cart Co-op you thought of because he would always talk about them, of course. As you said, Jane and Denny did not take the red wax with them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take what made makers makers, or what
Right.
made you recognize that bottle in the back of a TV shot or at the bar across the room.
Right.
Same thing, Caleb's kind of in the middle there because Peerless is newer in this iteration. For me, Spirits of French Lick was synonymous with Alan.
Right.
And while I do have confidence that they will continue to produce a good product, obviously Alan's protege took over, so it's not going to be a hard break. I think their work is going to be less on the product and more on the marketing side to flesh out their own identity independently of Alan's.
Right.
And I don't know, or I don't know, maybe I do. I not, but if I do, I obviously couldn't say. I don't know how long he'd been thinking about making a move or planning or such. Really, all I can say is that once a brand knows that they potentially would be losing their face, that's the first thing I'd focus on is how are we going to market this? How are we going to
Right.
say, no, we're still the same Spirits of French that you love. We're still going to have a consistent product that, if you want to put it this way, that Alan's been making for years. We're still going to be tasting his whiskeys from there for years.
Right.
And I don't think there's going to be a point where you go flip a switch and suddenly it's a totally different profile. So that's where it comes back to. It's going to be about the marketing and how do they show they can survive and thrive without him as their face,
Mm-hmm.
going on podcasts, going on shows, having his own shows, having the Instagram presence and social media presence that he has. Every time mentioning, I'm the Alchemist of the Black Forest, I'm the Alchemist Cabinet on Instagram, and everything else that he says. But I'm also the head alchemist at Spirits of French Lick. And now that that's gone, that's to me where that's a more unique situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree, and I think the way you've segmented those three, the Maker's Mark, the Peerless, and the French Lick, I think that's right on. And I looked it up. Caleb is Caleb and the CEO from Peerless, Cordell Lawrence. They're starting Eastern Light Distilling out in Eastern Kentucky. $143 million project. So
it's a big gamble.
yeah, it is. It is. And to me, once if you've got if you're the owner of the distillery, but you're not a distiller,
Mhm.
and you've got a distiller that's helped you grow the brand, develop the taste profile, to me, it's worth, okay, here's how we're going to get you a piece of the pie so that we keep you here. One, we're not giving you up to any competitor or letting you create competition, but we're also keeping you and ensuring the consistency of what's been created over the 8, 10, whatever number of years that you've been there.
Mhm.
But that doesn't seem to be what any of these
Yeah.
distilleries want to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is where we have to start separating out, the big boys, so to speak. I don't think Beam
Sure.
Suntory was going to be giving Jane or Denny
No,
any ownership stakes.
no.
But yeah, with Caleb, maybe there was an offer, and I truly don't know in this situation. I'm purely
I don't know either.
speculating. Maybe there was a conversation with Corky and Carson to say, hey, either I want to figure out what my next move is. I think I've done everything I can here. Maybe there was just that decision that to achieve what he wanted to achieve, Caleb had to leave, and that's I think that's a normal progression for many people.
Yep.
Um,
And I think that was a
with
going home thing for Caleb because he's from
that too,
that
yeah,
part of the
for
state.
sure, for sure. Yeah. So whenever I see that people going closer to home or there's another reason, I tend to think, it's not just because the brand didn't give them what they wanted.
Right.
Um, there, I'm sure there were discussions about it. I don't think he just walked into Corky and Carson's office and was like, "Hey guys, 2 months, I'm gone."
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but
I wouldn't think so either. I think they've developed a great team there at Peerless. Uh, John Wadle is a super smart guy, talented guy. I can't do blind tastings with John in the room because he ruins them. Because he's got such a good palate. He's like, well, I think this, and he'll take another sip and he goes, I think this is what this is. And I'm like, will you just stop? Whatever
like the
superpower
power
you
of suggestion plus a
yeah,
superpower to just tell
yeah,
people what they're tasting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they've got some really talented people there, and I think they'll do well. French Lick, yeah, they've got rick houses full of whiskey that Alan's made, but you've got to do something. How are you going to market yourself? Because 4 or 5 years ago, it was Alan and Jolie Kasperzak on
Mhm.
Every week they were on 2 or 3 different podcasts. It didn't matter if it was Bob's podcast and it's
Mhm.
listened to by Bob.
Yeah.
They're there and they're talking with you and they're promoting the product and promoting Spirits of French Lick, and that just continued, and Alan continued to do that after Jolie left there.
Mhm.
So I don't know, apart from them, from Jolie when she was there, and then Alan up until the point he left, the marketing was slim to none from the
Mhm.
distillery itself.
I
So
think
they've got to figure that out.
yeah, I think at a certain point, maybe about 2 years ago or so, the Doty family, which owns Spirits of French Lick, um, I know been in contact with Laura Lynn quite a bit. She's kind of the main contact there.
Mhm.
I know they did start putting more effort into their own marketing. And yes, it was still a lot around Alan and Jolie
Mhm.
while she was still there, and then just Alan. But there was more to say. Their Spirits of French Lick kept promoting Alan as the face of it, but they started to realize, hey, we've got some good whiskey here, and also more that we need to sell. So we got to get out of just being in West Baden Springs, or Baden Springs. Sorry, I think there's German
Ba-
there.
yeah.
West Baden Springs.
It's
We got to
Southern
get
Indiana. It's Baden.
it's yeah, yeah,
It's Southern
fair.
Indiana. It's Baden.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's for sales. It's yeah.
It's yes.
So that one's sorry. That one just gets me all the time. It's like, really, really, guys.
Yeah.
Um, then again, I have a problem saying Louisville and then saying St. Louis. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, different tangent. Um, that's our linguistic podcast for today. And so, but yeah, as you said, they're gonna have whiskey from Allen for years.
Mhm.
And but if they want to move it, if they want to get that stuff sold,
Mhm.
they can do it. I'm very curious to see if any agreement was made to be able to continue using his name, even to say that this is who the distiller was,
Mhm.
this is who distilled this product, chose the
Mhm.
cask that it was aged in, and everything else for it. Yes, he's working here now at a different place, but because if they can't use his name at all, other than if someone asks them who
Mhm.
distilled it, then I think that that handicaps them even more in terms of what they can use.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it benefits them to try to pretend like Alan was never there.
For sure.
Uh, you
And
know,
and we should say the messages put out by both sides were very amicable. They were very
yeah.
honorable. So if there is any tension or bad blood, at least at minimum, it is not spilled into public,
Mhm.
and that's the most important thing.
Well, it's a small world.
That too, yeah.
I mean, we can talk about how big the whiskey world is, but even that big whiskey world, it's a small world, and
Hmm.
people are, it's a whole lot easier to get along with folks than it
Yep.
is to start picking fights. And
Hmm.
quite honestly, where he is now at Old Homestead Distilling there at Patoka Lake. It's 15-minute drive from
Mhm.
Spirits of French Lick, so it's not like they're uh, moving to the other side of the country or anything. So this,
They're
yeah,
going to run into each other at a Big Red somewhere.
yes, they will. Yeah, and at a
It's going to happen.
whiskey festivals and sure. So yeah, I don't think that there's anything that's going to come out of that that's negative or contentious. I don't think it's anybody's best interest really. But this is a topic that I mentioned pre-show that this is one of those that I think that we can probably dig into a little bit deeper at some other time. But I do want to know what you think about this 8-year rye from Kentucky Peerless.
So the first thing is I'll say it's a very soft rye.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it doesn't have the sharpness of, let's say, a 95.5. And we know this is a more Kentucky style rye mash bill, so that makes sense.
They don't disclose the mash bill, but I've been told that it's in the mid 60s in
Right,
terms of
exactly.
rye percentage.
Yeah, it's I actually have a very sneaking suspicion that it's within a percentage point or two of what Michter's is, which also doesn't disclose theirs, but there are some similarities there, both in entry proof and some of the notes. But yeah, it's a very soft rye, plenty of corn in there. One thing I'll say though is you do know it's a rye, which I've I think I got into trouble about this, but last year Heaven Hill came out with Parker's Heritage Collection cast strength rye, and everyone was so excited. We're finally getting a cast strength rye from Heaven Hill, and I tried it and I was like, this is a really good bourbon.
Right.
There's something about a 51% mash bill. Very few for me have gotten right. Because if it's a rye, I don't need to be 95.5, but like I want to know it's a rye.
Yeah.
Anyway, definitely. Let's see. It's some maple sugar on there. It's not. I said it's not overly sweet. There's a dark sweetness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maple sugar, muscovado, the really dark stuff, almost verging on molasses. There's some ginger in there, coriander, which is a spice that I'm finding more and more in whiskey nowadays. I'm curious to see why that is. And what's that last note there? There's something there. Coffee grounds, maybe?
Sure.
It's like a dark taste that's on the back of the mouth, back of the tongue.
Yeah. I think that's solid. I think I can get that. I also get a little hint of spearmint in it and some orange peel, especially on the nose.
It's funny. I'm getting the orange peel on the nose. Like you say, I don't get it at all on the palate, but definitely on the nose. The spearmint, yeah, I can see it. Like you're talking about it. I always have to check with people like with spearmint or peppermint or winter mint or whatever. Like you're talking more of a kind of milder mint.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No, it's not a wintergreen or a peppermint. It's more of a very subtle mint note.
Yeah, it's not going to freshen your breath. It's just going to add some flavor.
No, exactly. No, freshen your breath with 8-year-old rye whiskey. Yeah, that makes sense.
Not a bad thing. Brush your teeth with a bottle of Jack.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the one thing I'm looking for a little more on here is mouthfeel.
Okay.
I think it's funny. It goes back to what I was thinking about with the other Peerless products that over the course of the several years. The flavors on this taste like the more mature flavors, the chocolates, the dark fruit, syrupiness. But the mouth feels like it's missing something, almost like it might have been at like the bottom of a rick or something. where there wasn't a ton of oxidization or a ton of oak extraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I'm almost, and this is super rare for me, I'm almost asking for more oak in this, for a little more, just more body on there.
Yeah. Well, for an
To carry those good flavors.
8-year-old whiskey, which is I think the oldest thing that I know it's the oldest thing that they've put out so far.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of oak on it either. I get, I guess, some, if you can call it sweet oak, but I don't get that real tannic oak note.
I can see that, like the sweet smell of like it's hard to do this without adding smoke in there. I was gonna say like the sweet smell of a campfire.
Yeah.
If you can separate out the smoke, because there's no smoke
Yeah.
that I
No,
get in this.
no. I get what you're saying. Now I see there's a lot of oiliness in it. You can't see it in the video, but there's a lot of oiliness on my glass with it.
Mhm.
But I don't get that. That doesn't necessarily translate to what it feels like as I drink it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was looking in the glass as you said that, and I was like, it's there. It looks like it should be there.
Right.
So that's what I would say about this. It's got good flavors. It needs that mouthfeel to be there to punch the flavors up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm thinking too, like in about the same age range, you've got New Riff, who also just put out their 8-year. It was an 8-year bourbon, not an 8-year rye, but
Mm-hmm.
8-year-old bourbon, and that one a couple proof points lower. That was bottled in bond because it's New Riff.
Right.
But even at a lower proof point, I found it had a little bit more body. And what may also be different here, you said this is a single barrel,
Right.
right? So that in itself, I mean, the New Riff was not a single barrel; it was a blend. So they've got different things to play with there. This could have just been a single barrel that, like I said, was at the bottom of a rick. They could have another 8-year-old cask that has exactly what we're looking for, plus those flavors that we're recognizing and liking.
Yeah. No, I mean I absolutely understand what you're saying in terms of the mouthfeel of it, but I really enjoy it. I think it's a great whiskey. I look forward to what else they've got coming up with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll get you that toasted barrel. I want you to try that because I think
For sure.
that may be, I really like the high rye bourbon that came out last year, but the toasted barrel may be the best thing that I've ever had from there. So.
And look, credit to Peerless as well. I think again, for someone who really does not like woody whiskeys or anything like that, their double oaking process, they figured it out. They do a great job of having 2 casks on there without getting tannic, and that's a rare skill. So again, kudos to them.
Yeah, the first double oak was a mistake, or it was out of necessity because they had terrible leaking barrels. That they rebarreled and say, well, it's double oaked, and so that's how that started. But I would agree they've done a good job with how they handle their double oak stuff.
Yeah, and like I said too, just to close out on that as well, I had the pleasure of talking with John and Ellie Reed, one of their distillers, a couple months ago, and this was before the announcement was made that John was getting promoted. And again, they know what they're doing. They learned from Caleb. They understudied, if you will.
Sure.
And so I don't think there's not going to be a huge break in it. And I think that's by design for sure. And they've both proven in just a couple of months that they've been there, or the year or so they've been there without Caleb, that they can continue doing the same thing, producing great whiskeys the way that they want to, at lower proof points, at lower entry proofs. And while still, I think, putting their own stamp on it. And I think that's what I'm looking for. I want to see in the next several years, like, what does John do that's going to say, all right, this is Peerless. This is John's Peerless.
Yeah. And I think, and I think that they're doing some of that now that they're numbering their batches. So each batch, I mean, they're not doing these, 200 barrel batches or 1,000 barrel batches. It's
right
6, 7, 8
Six.
barrels or something. and so it'll have that peerless profile, but I think each batch is going to have some nuance to it, and that's where I think somebody like John can really, uh, stamp his name alongside it. Not that he's trying
Mhm.
to outshine anybody else there, but I think that he's going to be able to pull together some things and do some unique blending with it
Mhm.
that will make having those batches numbered now uh, an important concept for Peerless going forward.
Whenever you see a new distiller, and this could be new replacing someone, new distillery, something. I think there's a delicate balance that needs to be had of humility and hubris,
Yes.
where you need to look back and say, all right, I know what my predecessors have made, uh, but also the hubris and the self-confidence to say, all right, I'm going to take what they made, but I'm also going to put my stamp on it, because when it's my time to hand off the baton, I want to be remembered.
Right.
You know,
Right.
um, yeah, and we see it from these multi-generational distilleries, whether it's Turkey Beam or whoever,
Mhm.
where it's seventh or eighth generation now. I think Freddie's eighth generation.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, where they have to put their stamp on it. They have to figure out how to put their stamp on it. And in some ways, the smaller distilleries, Peerless being, I would consider them one of the smaller ones, even though they're one of the larger ones in terms of craft.
Right.
Uh, they they have more. They're more nimble, and they can
Exactly.
change a little more. And yeah, I'm very curious. And this impacts non-owner distillers, the people who have moved. I think it's all part of the same conversation of how do you balance the past, put your stamp on it, and don't get lost in this history.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that's very well said. Very well said. Well, this has been fun. We've tried 5 excellent pours tonight. There was not a one that I thought, I don't think that's that good. I thought they were all great, and I appreciate you sharing with me everything that you did. Um, and I think we've touched on some topics that we can further explore at some point down the road.
For sure.
And I'm sure we'll do it while we're drinking some really good whiskey too. So, but so we're wrapping this up. But before we do, tell everybody again where they can find you and everything that you do.
Sure. So you can find me Whiskey Ring Podcast on anywhere where you listen to podcasts. If it's on a if it's not on a platform, reach out to me. Let me know. I'll get it on there. You can also find me at whiskeyinmyweddingring.com. That's whiskey with an E. So whiskeyinmyweddingring.com for tastings, reviews, notes. I have pulled back a little. I used to be putting out like 3 or 4 reviews a week. It's a little unsustainable. So
A lot.
yeah. Um, Side note: 2 years ago I did summer or September of Stag, uh, and it was for National Bourbon Heritage Month. I got my hands on samples of every George T. Stagg and Stagg Junior release
Oh
up
wow.
until that point, and I tasted all of them in a month. I think I was doing 3 or 4 a day, and I mean, I had one of my perfect score whiskeys, the George T. Stagg 2002,
Yeah.
the first release. That is one of my perfect whiskeys. I had some real clunkers, but that was after that I was just exhausted. I
That's a
needed
lot.
I
That is a
needed a
lot.
sober October for myself just for that. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, whiskey in my red ring for tastings, reviews. If there's something you would like me to review, and this can be from individuals or companies, and you want to get my thoughts on it, please just reach out. I'll shoot you my address and we'll talk. Happy to do so. And I can be found on social media, most social media, whiskey in my wedding ring, and Whiskey Ring Podcast should redirect you to Whiskey My Wedding Ring on any social media
Mhm.
on that. And the last thing I want to just say here with in terms of reaching out, don't be afraid. Really reach out. Don't be afraid of a bad review. Don't be afraid. I'm going to look at it and be like, I wouldn't try this. I mean, look, I've had Malort. I've had all the things that people say are these god awful things. And some of them, yeah, they're pretty damn bad. But others, I'm someone who loves anisette and black licorice, and other people think I have a dark soul because of it. So I will try everything. If I don't like it, I'll let you know first. I'm not going to go blabbing like, oh God, I hated this thing. So, don't be afraid of the reviewer, and don't be afraid to come on the podcast and get some hard but fair questions, I hope.
Yeah. Good. As for our show, you can watch us on YouTube. If you're watching right now, please hit the subscribe button. We would appreciate that. Or you can listen on your favorite podcast platform, as long as it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. We have a Facebook page where we will post all of our shows, including this one. We have a Facebook group where you can post what you may be drinking at the moment, and what you might be listening to while you're drinking it. If you run across a new band, you want to share that, please do. You run across a new whiskey, you want to share that, please do. We want to help everybody find something that's going to help them expand either their tasting palette or their musical palette, and have a good time while we're doing it. So, David, man, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you being on again. We will definitely do this again very soon. And next time you're in Louisville, let me know. We'll get together and have a good pour somewhere as well. So
I gotta say, it'll probably be next time you're in New York, because I got I'm expecting a little one very shortly, so I won't be coming to Louisville.
Oh yeah, so you've got a child coming. What is it? August?
Mid-August. Yeah, 3
Yeah.
months. So
Well,
not too much
congratulations.
traveling going to be happening in my next year or so, but
Congratulations.
I hope to
That's
be at
awesome.
next year's KBF, let's say.
All right. Well, we will watch and wait for news of the birth of your child. If you're having a boy or a girl?
A girl.
Girl.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. In contrast, my youngest son just got married as we're recording this, 3 days ago. So
That's true. I did see that. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. So kind of different ends of that spectrum, but you've got a wonderful journey ahead of you, and you and your wife will do great. So until next time, on behalf of David and myself, thank you for watching. Tell your friends, and cheers, love, and free bird. Good night.